Fear, it's that invisible force that can stop us in our tracks, whispering doubts into our minds and holding us back from the lives we want to live. Maybe it's the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, or even the fear of the unknown. We've all felt it, that tightening in your chest, the racing thoughts, the way it seems to shrink your world. But what if I told you that fear isn't the enemy? What if, instead of running from it, you could face it head-on and use it as a tool to grow stronger? That's exactly what Stoicism teaches us. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Fear, he reminds us, isn't something that happens to us, it's something we create in our minds. And if we can change how we perceive it, we can change how it affects us. In this video, we're diving into 10 powerful Stoic insights that will help you confront and conquer your deepest fears. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical tools you can use to transform fear from a paralyzing force into a source of strength. Whether you're struggling with anxiety, self-doubt, or uncertainty, these principles will guide you toward a calmer, more empowered way of living. So, let's begin this journey together and discover how Stoicism can help you reclaim control over your mind and your life. Stoicism teaches us to focus only on what we can control. This is the foundation of what's known as the Dichotomy of Control, a principle that Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, emphasized throughout his teachings. At its core, this idea is about recognizing the difference between what's within our power and what isn't. Think about it. So much of our fear comes from trying to control things that are simply beyond our reach, other people's opinions, the outcome of events, or even the future. But when we shift our focus to what we can influence, our thoughts, our actions, our responses, we start to see fear for what it really is, a reaction to the unknown, not a reflection of reality. Let's take a modern example, public speaking. For many, the thought of standing in front of a crowd is terrifying. But what exactly are we afraid of? Is it the possibility of stumbling over our words, the fear of being judged? Here's the thing, we can't control how others perceive us, and we can't guarantee that everything will go perfectly. What we can control is how we prepare, how we choose to approach the situation, and how we respond if things don't go as planned. By focusing on these aspects, we strip away the layers of fear that come from trying to manage the uncontrollable. This principle doesn't just apply to public speaking, it's relevant to almost every fear we face. Worrying about a job interview, you can't control the hiring manager's decision, but you can control how you present yourself and the effort you put into preparing. Anxious about a relationship, you can't control someone else's feelings, but you can control how you communicate and show up in that relationship. The more we practice this mindset, the more we realize how much of our fear is tied to things that are ultimately out of our hands. And when we let go of those, we free up mental and emotional energy to focus on what truly matters. So, take a moment to reflect. What fears are you holding onto that stem from trying to control the uncontrollable? What would it feel like to release them and redirect your energy toward what you can influence? This is the power of the dichotomy of control. It's not about ignoring fear, but about understanding it, breaking it down, and choosing where to place your focus. And when you do that, you'll find that fear loses its grip, leaving you with a sense of clarity and calm. Seneca, another towering figure in Stoic philosophy, once observed that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. This insight cuts to the heart of how fear operates. So much of what we fear isn't grounded in what's actually happening, it's rooted in the stories we tell ourselves, the worst-case scenarios we play out in our minds. Fear, in many ways, is a product of our imagination. It thrives on uncertainty, filling the gaps with exaggerated possibilities that feel all too real. But here's the truth, most of what we fear never comes to pass, and even when it does, it's rarely as catastrophic as we imagined. Take Seneca's own life as an example. He was exiled to Corsica by the Roman Emperor Claudius, a punishment that could have easily crushed his spirit. Exile meant separation from everything familiar, his home, his status, his loved ones. It was a situation that could have been consumed by fear and despair, but Seneca chose a different path. Instead of letting his imagination run wild with thoughts of loss and suffering, he focused on what he could control, his mindset. He used his time in exile to reflect, write, and deepen his understanding of Stoic principles. By examining his fears rationally, he realized that much of his suffering was self-created. The exile itself wasn't the source of his pain, it was his perception of it. This principle applies just as powerfully today. Think about the fears that keep you up at night. Are they based on facts or are they assumptions? Are you reacting to what's actually happening or to what might happen? For instance, imagine you're worried about an upcoming presentation. Your mind might race with thoughts of forgetting your lines, being judged harshly, or even humiliating yourself in front of your peers. But how likely are these outcomes? And even if they did happen, would they truly be as devastating as you imagine? When we pause to question our fears, we often find that they're built on shaky foundations. The Stoic approach isn't about dismissing fear outright. It's about examining it. Ask yourself, is this fear based on evidence or is it a story I'm telling myself? What's the worst that could happen and how would I handle it if it did? By shining a light on our fears, we strip them of their power. They become smaller, more manageable, and sometimes even laughable. This isn't about pretending everything will always work out perfectly. It's about recognizing that our imagination often amplifies our fears far beyond what reality warrants. So the next time you feel fear creeping in, take a step back. Challenge the narrative your mind is spinning. Is it rooted in fact, or is it a product of your imagination? When you start to see fear for what it truly is, a mental construct rather than an inevitable reality, you'll find that it loses much of its hold over you. And in that space, you'll discover a newfound sense of clarity and courage. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "Do not disturb yourself by picturing your life as a whole. Do not assemble in your mind the many and varied troubles which have come to you in the past and will come again in the future, but ask yourself with regard to every present difficulty, what is there in this that is unbearable and beyond endurance?" This is the essence of Insight 3, embracing the present moment. Fear, more often than not, is a time traveler. It pulls us into the past, replaying regrets and mistakes, or catapults us into the future, conjuring up scenarios that may never come to pass. But the present is where we have power. It's the only moment we can truly act, think, or feel. And when we anchor ourselves here, fear begins to lose its grip. Think about it. How often do your fears revolve around something that isn't happening right now? Maybe it's the dread of an upcoming deadline, the anxiety of a future conversation, or the weight of past failures that still haunt you. These fears feel real, but they're not grounded in the present. They're shadows cast by what's already happened or what might happen. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that the present moment is all we truly have, and it's also where we can find the most clarity and peace. So, how do we practice this? One powerful way is through mindfulness. Mindfulness is simply the act of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about noticing the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your breath, or the sounds around you. When you're fully present, there's no room for fear to take over. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, the shadows disappear. Even a few minutes of mindfulness each day can help you build this habit of staying grounded. Another practical tool is journaling. Writing down your thoughts can help you untangle the web of fear and bring you back to the present. Try this exercise. At the end of each day, write down one thing you're grateful for, one thing you accomplished, and one thing you're looking forward to. This simple practice shifts your focus from what's gone wrong or what might go wrong to what's happening right now. It's a way of training your mind to see the present as a source of strength, not anxiety. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine you're worried about an upcoming job interview. Your mind might race with thoughts like, what if I mess up? Or what if they don't like me? But in the present moment, none of that is happening. Right now, you're sitting here reading this, you're safe, you're okay. By bringing your attention back to the present, you can calm your mind and prepare for the interview with clarity rather than fear. This isn't about ignoring the past or the future entirely. It's about not letting them dominate your thoughts. The past can teach us and the future can inspire us, but neither should control us. When you find yourself spiraling into fear, ask yourself, is this happening right now? If the answer is no, take a deep breath and bring your focus back to the present. What can you do in this moment to move forward? What small step can you take to ease your mind? By embracing the present, you're not just reducing fear, you're reclaiming your power. You're choosing to live fully in the only moment that truly exists. And in that space, you'll find a sense of calm and control that fear can't touch. So, take a moment to pause, notice where you are, what you're doing, and how you're feeling. The present is your anchor, and it's always here, waiting for you to return. Stoicism places virtue at the center of a meaningful life. According to the Stoics, virtue defined as qualities like courage, wisdom, justice, and self-discipline is the highest good. It's not just a lofty ideal, it's a practical tool for navigating life's challenges, including fear. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, put it simply, courage is not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. In other words, courage isn't about never feeling afraid, it's about acting in spite of fear. And when we cultivate virtue, we equip ourselves with the inner strength to face whatever comes our way. Let's break this down. Courage, one of the core Stoic virtues, isn't about being fearless. It's about recognizing fear and choosing to move forward anyway. Think of it like this: fear is a signal, not a stop sign. It tells us something important, maybe that we're stepping out of our comfort zone or facing uncertainty. But courage reminds us that we can handle it. Wisdom, another key virtue, helps us see fear for what it is, a natural response to the unknown, not a reflection of our limitations. And self-discipline, that's what keeps us grounded, helping us stay focused on what we can control rather than being swept away by anxiety. History is full of examples of people who embodied these virtues in the face of fear. Take Harriet Tubman, for instance. Born into slavery, she risked her life repeatedly to lead others to freedom through the Underground Railroad. She wasn't fearless, she felt the weight of danger with every step. But her courage, wisdom, and self-discipline allowed her to act despite her fear. She understood the risks, but she also knew the value of what she was fighting for. Her story is a powerful reminder that fear doesn't have to dictate our actions. When we align ourselves with virtue, we find the strength to rise above it. So, how can we apply this in our own lives? Start by asking yourself, what would it look like to act with courage in this situation? What would wisdom tell me about this fear? And how can self-discipline help me stay focused on what truly matters? These questions shift the focus from the fear itself to the values that guide our response. For example, if you're afraid of speaking up in a meeting, courage might mean sharing your idea even if your voice shakes. Wisdom might remind you that your perspective is valuable regardless of how others react. And self-discipline could help you prepare thoroughly so you feel more confident when the moment comes. The beauty of Stoic virtue is that it's not about perfection, it's about progress. You don't have to eliminate fear to live virtuously. You just have to choose to act in alignment with your values even when fear is present. Over time, this practice builds resilience. Fear becomes less of an obstacle and more of a teacher, showing you where you can grow stronger. So, take a moment to reflect what fears are holding you back right now. How could courage, wisdom, or self-discipline help you face them? Remember, virtue isn't something you're born with, it's something you cultivate through practice. And every time you choose to act with virtue, you're not just overcoming fear, you're becoming the kind of person who can face life's challenges with clarity and strength. That's the power of Stoic virtue. It transforms fear from a barrier into a stepping stone. What if fear isn't something to run from, but something to learn from? What if, instead of seeing it as an enemy, we could see it as a teacher? This is the heart of Insight 5, Reframing Fear as an Opportunity. The Stoics believed that challenges, whether they come in the form of fear, failure, or adversity, are not roadblocks but stepping stones. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: the obstacle is the way. In other words, what stands in our path can become the very thing that propels us forward, if we choose to see it that way. Think about it. Fear often arises when we're on the edge of something new, a new job, a new relationship, a new challenge. It's a signal that we're stepping out of our comfort zone, and that's where growth happens. The Stoics didn't shy away from fear. They leaned into it, using it as a tool to build resilience and wisdom. When we reframe fear as an opportunity, we stop seeing it as a threat and start seeing it as a chance to grow stronger, wiser, and more capable. Let's look at a modern example. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, who faced countless rejections before her first Harry Potter book was published. She was a single mother living on welfare, and the fear of failure loomed large. But instead of letting that fear paralyze her, she used it as motivation. Each rejection became a reminder of why she was writing in the first place, to share a story she believed in. Her fear didn't disappear, but it became a driving force, pushing her to keep going despite the odds. And in the end, that fear transformed into one of the most successful literary careers in history. This isn't just about big, life-changing moments. It's about the everyday fears we all face. Maybe it's the fear of speaking up in a meeting, the fear of trying something new, or even the fear of being vulnerable with someone you care about. What if, instead of avoiding these moments, you saw them as opportunities to grow? What if your fear was pointing you towards something important, a chance to build confidence, deepen a connection, or discover a new strength? The Stoic approach isn't about pretending fear doesn't exist. It's about changing how we relate to it. When we reframe fear as an opportunity, we stop fighting it and start learning from it. We ask ourselves, what is this fear trying to teach me? What can I gain by facing it? And how can I use this moment to become a better version of myself? So take a moment to reflect. What fears are you facing right now? How might they be guiding you toward growth? Remember, fear isn't the enemy, it's a teacher. And when we're willing to listen, it can show us the way forward. The next time fear shows up, don't push it away. Lean into it. Ask it what it has to teach you. Because on the other side of fear is not just relief, but growth, strength, and a deeper understanding of who you are. Now, let's explore Insight 6, the power of negative visualization. This might sound counterintuitive at first. Why would anyone want to imagine worst-case scenarios? Isn't that just feeding our fears? But the Stoics had a different perspective. They called this practice premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils, and it was a cornerstone of their philosophy. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, believed that by visualizing the worst that could happen, we could strip fear of its power. Why? Because when we confront our fears head-on, we often find that they're not as overwhelming as they seem. Here's how it works. Instead of avoiding the things that scare us, we deliberately imagine them in vivid detail. What's the worst that could happen? How would we handle it? By mentally rehearsing these scenarios, we prepare ourselves emotionally and practically. It's like building a mental safety net. If the worst does happen, we're ready. And if it doesn't, we've already faced it in our minds, so the fear loses its grip. Let's take a practical example. Preparing for a job interview. Many of us feel anxious about interviews because we're afraid of rejection, of not being good enough, or of saying the wrong thing. But what if, instead of avoiding those thoughts, we leaned into them? Imagine the worst-case scenario. You stumble over your words, the interviewer seems unimpressed, and you don't get the job. Now ask yourself, what would you do next? You'd update your resume, apply for other positions, and keep moving forward. By visualizing this outcome, you realize that even the worst-case scenario isn't the end of the world. It's manageable, and that realization can be incredibly freeing. Seneca used this practice in his own life. He often reminded himself that everything he had, his wealth, his status, even his relationships, could be taken away at any moment. By imagining the loss of these things, he wasn't being pessimistic. He was preparing himself to face life's uncertainties with resilience. This practice didn't make him fearful, it made him fearless. Because when you've already faced the worst in your mind, what's left to be afraid of? This isn't about dwelling on negativity or expecting the worst to happen. It's about building mental resilience. When we practice negative visualization, we're not just preparing for potential challenges, we're also cultivating gratitude. By imagining what it would be like to lose the things we value, we gain a deeper appreciation for what we have. It's a reminder that even in the face of fear, there's always something to be grateful for. So, how can you apply this in your own life? Start by identifying a fear that's been holding you back. What's the worst that could happen? Play it out in your mind step by step. How would you respond? What would you do next? By walking through this mental exercise, you'll find that fear becomes less intimidating. You'll see that even in the worst-case scenario, you have the strength and resources to keep going. Negative visualization isn't about inviting fear into your life. It's about disarming it. When you confront your fears in this way, you take away their power to control you. You realize that you're stronger than you think, and that no matter what happens, you have the tools to handle it. So, the next time fear tries to hold you back, don't shy away. Lean into it, imagine the worst, and then remind yourself you've already faced it and you're ready. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, once said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not." This simple yet profound idea lies at the heart of Insight 7, detaching from external outcomes. Fear, more often than not, stems from our attachment to how things should turn out. We cling to specific results, whether it's landing a job, winning someone's approval, or achieving a goal. And when those outcomes feel uncertain, fear takes hold. But what if we could let go of that attachment? What if we could focus not on the result, but on the effort, the intention, and the process? That's where true freedom lies. Consider the story of Cato the Younger, a Stoic who lived during the tumultuous final days of the Roman Republic. Cato was deeply committed to his principles, even when it meant standing against powerful figures like Julius Caesar. When Caesar's forces gained the upper hand, Cato faced exile and the collapse of everything he had fought for. Yet, even in the face of such loss, he remained steadfast. Why? Because Cato understood that his worth wasn't tied to external outcomes. His happiness and sense of purpose came from living in alignment with his values, not from whether he succeeded or failed in the eyes of the world. His detachment from the outcome allowed him to face adversity with remarkable calm and dignity. This principle isn't just for ancient philosophers, it's deeply relevant to our lives today. Think about the times you felt anxious or fearful. Chances are that fear was tied to an outcome you couldn't control. Maybe it's the fear of not getting a promotion, the fear of a relationship ending, or even the fear of not meeting your own expectations. When we attach our happiness to these external results, we give fear a foothold. But when we detach, we reclaim our power. We shift our focus to what we can control, our effort, our attitude, and our response. So how do we practice this kind of detachment? Start by asking yourself, what outcome am I overly attached to? Is it a specific goal, a person's opinion, or a particular version of the future? Once you've identified it, remind yourself that while you can influence the outcome, you can't control it entirely. Instead of fixating on the result, focus on the process. For example, if you're working toward a promotion, concentrate on doing your best work, building strong relationships, and growing your skills. Let go of whether or not the promotion happens. When you detach from the outcome, you free yourself from the fear of not achieving it. This doesn't mean you stop caring or stop striving. It means you stop letting external results dictate your inner peace. Detachment isn't about indifference, it's about acceptance. It's about recognizing that while you can't control the outcome, you can control how you show up in the process. And when you do that, fear loses its grip. You're no longer held hostage by the what-ifs or the should-haves. Instead, you're free to act with clarity, purpose, and courage. Take a moment to reflect. What outcomes are you clinging to right now? How might your life change if you let go of that attachment? Remember, detachment isn't about giving up, it's about stepping into a deeper sense of freedom. When you release your grip on external results, you open yourself up to a more peaceful, empowered way of living. And in that space, fear no longer controls you. You control it. Adversity isn't just something to endure, it's something to embrace. This is the heart of Insight 8, Cultivating Resilience Through Hardship. The Stoics believed that challenges, no matter how difficult, are opportunities to grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius, who faced immense personal and political struggles during his reign as Roman emperor, often reflected on this idea. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very obstacles that seem to block our path can become the tools we use to build resilience and strength. Fear, when faced head-on, doesn't weaken us, it shapes us. Let's take a closer look at how this works. When we encounter adversity, fear often shows up as a natural response. It's our mind's way of signaling that something is uncertain or difficult. But instead of seeing fear as a sign to retreat, the Stoics encourage us to see it as a call to rise. Every time we face our fears, we're not just overcoming a challenge, we're building mental and emotional muscle. Think of it like lifting weights. The resistance is what makes you stronger. Without it, growth wouldn't be possible. History is filled with examples of people who turned adversity into strength. Take the story of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his fight against apartheid in South Africa. During those long years, he faced unimaginable fear and hardship, but instead of letting it break him, he used it to deepen his resolve and compassion. Mandela emerged from prison not as a bitter man, but as a leader who inspired a nation to heal and unite. His resilience wasn't just about enduring suffering, it was about transforming it into something meaningful. He once said, "Do not judge me by my successes, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." That's the essence of Stoic resilience. It's not about avoiding fear or failure, but about rising stronger each time. So, how can we apply this in our own lives? Start by reframing how you see adversity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Or how can this make me stronger? When you face a fear, whether it's a difficult conversation, a career setback, or a personal loss, remind yourself that this moment is an opportunity to grow. It's not about pretending the fear isn't there. It's about choosing to move forward despite it. Take a moment to reflect. What fears or challenges are you facing right now? How might they be shaping your character? Are they teaching you patience, courage, or perseverance? The Stoics believed that every hardship carries a lesson, and every fear is a chance to build resilience. When we embrace this mindset, we stop seeing adversity as something to avoid and start seeing it as something to lean into. This doesn't mean we have to enjoy hardship or pretend it's easy. It simply means we recognize its value. Fear and adversity are like the fire that tempers steel. They make us stronger, more resilient, and more capable of handling whatever life throws our way. So the next time you feel fear rising, don't shy away, stand firm. Remember that this moment, no matter how difficult, is shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And that's a gift no one can take away. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." At first glance, this might seem like a simple observation, but it carries a profound truth. Nothing lasts forever. Not the good times, not the bad times, and certainly not the fears that haunt us. Fear has a way of tricking us into believing that the challenges we face are permanent, that the pain, the uncertainty, or the failure we're experiencing will define us forever. But the Stoics remind us that this is an illusion. Life is constantly changing, and so are we. When we embrace this truth, fear loses its power to paralyze us. Think about it. How often do we let fear take over because we assume the worst will last indefinitely? Maybe it's the fear of failure after a setback at work, or the fear of rejection after a difficult breakup. In those moments, it's easy to feel like the pain will never end, like we'll never recover. But the Stoic perspective offers a different lens. They saw impermanence not as something to fear, but as something to embrace. Everything, our circumstances, our emotions, even our fears, is temporary. And when we internalize this, we can face even the most daunting challenges with a sense of perspective. Let's bring this to life with a modern example. Imagine you've just been passed over for a promotion. The fear of failure might creep in, whispering that you're not good enough, that you'll never advance in your career. But here's the thing, this moment isn't permanent. It's just one chapter in a much larger story. Maybe this setback will lead you to explore new opportunities, develop new skills, or even discover a passion you didn't know you had. The Stoics would encourage you to see this not as a dead end, but as a detour, a chance to grow and adapt. This principle applies to so many of the fears we face. The fear of public speaking. It might feel overwhelming now, but with practice it can become second nature. The fear of being alone. It might feel isolating in the moment, but it can also be an opportunity to build a deeper relationship with yourself. The key is to remind yourself that nothing stays the same. What feels insurmountable today might be a distant memory tomorrow. So take a moment to reflect. What fears are you holding onto because they feel permanent? What would it mean to see them as temporary instead? The Stoics believed that impermanence isn't something to dread. It's something to celebrate. It means that no matter how difficult things seem, they will change. And so will you. When we let go of the illusion of permanence, we open ourselves up to the possibility of growth, resilience, and even joy. Fear might still show up, but it won't stay forever. And neither will you. The final insight we'll explore is perhaps the most transformative of all, the practice of self-examination. The Stoics believed that true growth begins with self-awareness. By taking the time to reflect on our thoughts, actions, and emotions, we can uncover the roots of our fears and begin to dismantle them. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's most famous practitioners, exemplified this through his personal writings known as Meditations. These weren't grand philosophical treatises meant for public consumption. They were private reflections, a daily practice of examining his own mind and behavior. Through this process, he gained clarity, strength, and a deeper understanding of himself. So, what does self-examination look like in practice? It's about creating space to pause and reflect, to ask yourself honest questions about what's driving your fears. Are they based on reality, or are they fueled by assumptions and stories you've told yourself? Are they rooted in things you can control, or are they tied to outcomes beyond your reach? This kind of introspection isn't about judging yourself, it's about understanding yourself. And when you do that, fear begins to lose its power. You start to see it not as an enemy, but as a signal pointing you toward areas where you can grow. One of the simplest ways to practice self-examination is through journaling. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to write down your thoughts. What fears came up today? How did you respond to them? What patterns do you notice over time? This isn't about dwelling on negativity. It's about shining a light on your inner world so you can navigate it more effectively. Marcus Aurelius used his journal to remind himself of Stoic principles, to challenge his own assumptions, and to reinforce his commitment to living virtuously. You can do the same. By putting your fears into words, you take away their mystery and begin to see them for what they truly are. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're feeling anxious about an upcoming presentation. Instead of letting that anxiety spiral, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Is it the fear of being judged, of making a mistake, or of not being good enough? Once you identify the root of the fear, you can address it directly. Maybe you realize that your fear of judgment stems from a deeper insecurity about your abilities. With that awareness, you can take steps to build your confidence, perhaps by practicing your presentation more, seeking feedback, or reminding yourself of past successes. The act of self-examination doesn't eliminate fear, but it gives you the tools to manage it. This practice isn't just about conquering fear, it's about building a stronger relationship with yourself. When you take the time to reflect, you start to see patterns in your thoughts and behaviors. You notice how certain triggers lead to fear and how certain habits help you overcome it. Over time, this self-awareness becomes a source of empowerment. You're no longer at the mercy of your fears, you're in control of how you respond to them. And that's where true freedom lies. So here's a challenge for you. Tonight, before you go to bed, take 5 minutes to reflect on your day. What fears showed up? How did they affect you, and what can you learn from them? This small act of self-examination can be the first step toward transforming your relationship with fear. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate fear entirely, it's to understand it, to grow from it, and to move forward with clarity and courage. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. So start digging. The answers you're looking for are already within you. Fear, it's a universal experience, something we all face at one point or another. But as we've explored throughout this video, fear doesn't have to control us. Through the lens of Stoicism, we've uncovered 10 powerful insights that can help us confront and conquer our deepest fears. Let's take a moment to revisit them. First, we learn to focus on what we can control, letting go of the rest. Second, we saw how much of our fear is rooted in imagination, not reality. Third, we embrace the present moment, anchoring ourselves in the here and now. Fourth, we discovered the strength of Stoic virtues, courage, wisdom, and self-discipline as tools to face fear head-on. Fifth, we reframed fear as an opportunity for growth, not something to avoid. Sixth, we practiced negative visualization, preparing ourselves for the worst while cultivating gratitude. Seventh, we detached from external outcomes, finding freedom in the process rather than the result. Eighth, we embraced adversity as a teacher, building resilience through hardship. Ninth, we recognize the impermanence of fear, knowing that nothing lasts forever. And finally, we turned inward, using self-examination to understand and dismantle our fears. These insights aren't just philosophical ideas, they're practical tools you can use in your everyday life. Fear isn't an insurmountable obstacle. It's a challenge to be met with wisdom, courage, and clarity. As Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The power to overcome fear lies within your mind, and with these Stoic principles, you have everything you need to face it. Now it's your turn. Take these insights and apply them to your own life. The next time fear shows up, don't run from it. Meet it with curiosity and courage. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow stronger? And remember, you're not alone in this journey. Share your experiences in the comments below. How have you faced your fears? What Stoic principles have helped you along the way? Your story could inspire someone else to take that first step toward conquering their own fears. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're here to explore more Stoic wisdom together, helping you live a life of clarity, resilience, and purpose. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, fear isn't the end of the road, it's just the beginning of a stronger, wiser you. Until next time, stay courageous, stay curious, and keep moving forward.